All right, we are gonna look at this desk, right? This desk is painted in Hermes orange. It's high gloss lacquer. It has 3 coats of lacquer on it. And we're having some issues with getting the lacquer to lay down perfectly glossy. It's a very large surface and it just doesn't want to lay down perfectly over the entire surface. So we're gonna have to, basically we're gonna have to wet sand and polish this thing, because when you start getting multiple coats of lacquer built up, you actually need to sand those coats down, because as you build those things up, that lacquer wants to crack, right? And what we're seeing here isn't cracking, consistencies in the finish. And I'll kind of show you what that looks like. But I'll go over in this video how I wet sand and polish any lacquered piece of furniture. We'll take this thing from being a very nice looking desk to a gleaming, perfect top that is glossy and exceptionally brilliant. So let's get into it. All right, some of the tools that we're gonna need: a random orbital sander. In this case, we're using a 6-inch fest tool, a random orbital sander. These things work fantastic, and you'll wanna hook this up to a vacuum so that we can suck all that dust away as we're sanding along this big top. Another tool that we're gonna need, oscillating buffing machine. So this is a DeWalt buffer, and this thing works great. I'll put the model number and everything like that in the notes. But it has multiple speeds. We can control the speed from about 600 RPMs all the way up to 3,500 RPMs. So we can get going really fast. So also, you're gonna need some sanding or some buffing pads. You're gonna need probably 3 different buffing pads for all the different compounds we're gonna use on our top to get this thing to look brilliant. You're gonna need some soapy water in a bottle. You're gonna need some kind of a rubbing compound, which is gonna go on your buffer. I use this 3M rubbing compound. It works great. I've used it forever. No reason to use anything else. You need some kind of a machine polish, right? This is a slightly abrasive polishing compound that is gonna take the swirl marks from your rubbing compound out and makes those swirl marks pretty much go away. You're gonna need some kind of actual polishing compound. And this is this butter wet wax, say that 3 times real fast. Butter wet wax, which again, I've used forever. It smells amazing. I love it. It's provides a brilliant shine. It's a fantastic product. Lastly, you're gonna need some sandpaper, okay? Depending on how deep your scratches are will dictate what kind of sandpaper you're gonna need. The higher the grit you go, the less work you're gonna have to do on the buffing side. So I'll probably start with an 800, I'll probably work up to a 1500, and then maybe a 2,000 or a 3,000 grit sandpaper. That'll make my buffing job a lot easier. Whereas if I were just to go to an 800, which you can do, you're just gonna end up buffing a lot more. So save yourself some work, use a higher grit sandpaper. Yeah, it costs a little bit extra money because you gotta have more sandpaper, but it's gonna save you some elbow grease later on down the road. We'll kind of go around our desktop here. See, it's very glossy, brilliant, looks really nice. Now the imperfections that we have to work out. It's very hard to see. I'll do my best to capture the crinkles you can kind of see right here. That's stuff that we have to get out. There's a little bit of crinkling right here. Imperfections aren't necessarily the problem. It's more about the process, right? That's why you're watching this video, so you can understand how to do this, not necessarily why you have to do it. So, all right, so I've loaded up some 800 grit sandpaper on my sander. I'm gonna run this across this top. I'm gonna keep my line speed consistent. I'm going to knock this lacquer finish down to a single flat surface. Wipe it all down, and you'll see here I'm gonna look at the surface, and you can see the bright spots. All those bright spots represent a dip or a low spot. You can see the color inconsistencies. All that stuff needs to come out if you're gonna get that brilliant, high gloss, polished look. You can see right there the sander didn't even hit those spots. So we'll have to sand this surface again with 800 here. We'll move up to our higher grits after that. Now we're gonna move up to 1,000 grit paper. I'm gonna sand this down with 1,000 grit to remove some of the 800 swirl marks. We'll wipe it all down. Next, we're gonna move up to our 1,500 grit and do the same thing. And I'm showing you this process every single time because this is what it takes to get this high gloss finish. All right, so at this point, the finish is very consistent. When we look across our surface here, it is all one tone. The level of the paint is even, which is what you're wanting. That's the secret to a really brilliant lacquered finish, is to have a very flat surface. A lot of people think that when you lay paint, paint lays flat. It doesn't. Paint actually lays unevenly, right? Because it's solvent based and there's a certain amount of solvents in there, there's a certain amount of solids all over this thing. You might get uneven line speed as you're spraying, which can cause certain spots to be higher than lower, or it can cause certain areas of your finish to be higher or lower than the other areas. So there's all kinds of factors that go into it. But when you flat sand it and then you buff it, you're left with a brilliant, uniform, flat, even finish. Most people don't understand that. That's the key, okay? So at this point, we have 1000 grit sanded our surface. We've wiped it down. We've looked for the inconsistencies. We've put on 1500 grit sandpaper and we've wet sanded with 1500 grit. And again, looking for uniformity in our sanding job. Again, it looks really good. There's not a lot of swirl marks. It looks fantastic. But for the purposes of this video, we'll take it up to 1500 just so that you kind of get the idea as to what I'm doing with the wet sanding. The speed of my sander is basically set at about 2 or 3. I'm not going super fast. I'd rather spend more time sanding than speed it up and try and rush it. You do not want to burn your finish. You always have to be very careful around your edges because it's very easy. If that sander creeps over that edge, you could burn it. And once you burn it, you might be able to drip finish it and make it look better, but you're in trouble. So you don't want to do that. So anyway, slower is better. So next steps, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go on our buffing part of the video. I'm going to go ahead and show you the different kind of compounds I use, how I use them, and we'll buff this thing up to a mirror shine that'll just wow anybody that sees it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start buffing. Let me put on my little buff apron here, a little piece of foam that I have. It's what I got. Anyway, we're going to spread on this number 1 3M rubbing compound. I'm going to start slow with my buffer just to kind of work this compound around, and then I run up to about 1500 RPMs and hit this thing really well. You'll see I make probably 3 or 4 directional passes going each direction. You really do remove a lot of material. We'll wipe everything down because there's so much wiping in this process, which is why I show it. Now I'm switching pads because you never use the same pad for a different compound, right? You always have a different pad for your different compounds. So again, just like I did before, I'm going to work this thing slowly to start. Then here I'm going to go up to about 1600 and work this stuff. And I work it till I start to see the compound give away. And again, we're wiping down, so always wipe. So much wiping in this process. Okay, we are on to our 3rd stage in our buffing process. So at this point, we have done our rubbing compound buff. We've also done our machine polish buff. Now the final thing we're going to do is we're going to do our butter wet wax polish, which is essentially just going to remove any hazing or anything like that that's left over in the finish, right? So it's going to get rid of the inconsistencies. Like you can only wipe off so much by hand. This polish, when we speed this thing up to about 1600 RPMs, is just going to whisk all that stuff off there, and you're going to be left with a uniform, polished, glossy surface. Like I said, it'll wow anybody that looks at it. It'll be like something that most people have never seen before. So it's beautiful. It's like a mirror, like a car. This is what you want, so let's get after it. This butter wet wax goes on with almost a watery consistency. But anyway, work your buffer up to about 2000 RPMs and work this stuff till you get a semi-consistent shine. Right? Then you're going to go ahead and wipe it off, and you should be left with a surface that has minimal inconsistencies and imperfections. It should be brilliant and beautiful. All right, so I hope you like this video. I know some of the shines and things like that can be hard to see. It's very hard to photograph and video these finishes, even though to the naked eye they're striking. I hope this video helps you to have an alternative way to work on your high gloss lacquered surfaces so that you don't have to constantly sand and respray, sand and respray. This is an alternative way to get a superior finish. So some of the benefits to sanding and respraying are that you can fix imperfections, you can fill them, you can then sand and lay a new coat, let it dry, and walk away and then go move on to something else. This process is going to take you probably a couple of hours. If you get good at it, the advantages to this are that you know what the end result is going to be. You know that the end result is going to be more brilliant than a simple respray, because you've went through the trouble to, again, make the surface flatter than it can be sprayed. You've taken the time to wet sand, buff, and polish the surface, which will always be superior to a sprayed finish. If you are in a hurry, sometimes you don't always have the option to respray, because when you respray something, not only does it take that hour to sand and respray, but you have to let it dry, right? When you let something dry, a good lacquer finish takes a good 8 hours to dry, and it takes even longer if you want to handle it. These finishes can be very delicate. You need at least 24 hours, I would say, before you even try and put hardware on this thing. If you're going to try and ship it, 24 hours is really pushed it. You need to give it more like 36 hours. So if you want to ship something out in a hurry, you're pressed for time, this is an option. You can get it done in a couple of hours. It's going to be superior, and you can send it out right away. So yeah, I hope you like this video. I hope it gives you, again, some options that you can try other than just respraying all the time. It can be incredibly frustrating to spray something, look at it, see imperfections in the finish, sand it, respray, come back, see more imperfections when it dries, and repeating that process can get very frustrating. So this is a fantastic way to just be done with it. Wet sand it, hit it with some buffing compound or some rubbing compound, polish it, be done with it, send it off, move on to the next project. So this definitely doesn't work for all surfaces. Flat surfaces are obviously the best. This process can be done on rounded surface and uneven, complex surfaces, spheres and things like that. Requires some different tools. The same philosophy technically applies to it, but I can do a video on that if you'd like to see it. Just reach out to me, let me know. If enough people tell me they want that video, I'd be happy to make it. People seem to really want this video, so I did the best I could, given the way that the video cameras show the shine and the way the light shows the shine. So I hope you like it. Please feel free to comment, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Give me feedback on what I did good, what I didn't do good, and I will, as I release more of these videos, I'll continue to do better. And if you'd like to see something specific, let me know. I love trying to help people learn the craft of woodworking, but also the craft of painting, the craft of finishing. As tradespeople, we constantly be trying to hone our skills and increase our skill set. I like the idea of being a jack of all trades, master of none. I by no means consider myself to be a master cabinet maker, master furniture maker, master painter, master finisher, none of that stuff. I'm just good enough that I can't pay someone else. So have a great one. Here's my getup for polishing. I just throw a piece of this 1/8 inch foam, wrap it around me, and then that shit can slosh all over me. It doesn't mess up my clothes.